Would you like me to or Clerk
Uh,
Beckerman?
What? I'm good. Eric, your job, but I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'll do it. Is Phil on?
No, I have the.
That's my
countdown.
point.
Oh, you have it?
Sorry.
Okay. Oh, no problem. All right, so I will call the roll. So Avon is here. Bellingham. Braintree.
Here.
Brookline.
Here.
Canton. Canton. Cohasset.
Cohasset, here.
Dedham.
Yeah.
Dover. Foxborough.
Here.
Franklin.
Here.
Holbrook. Medfield. Medway. Millis.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Needham. Norfolk.
Here.
Norwood. Okay, I'll do that one again. Norwood. Plainville. Quincy.
Here.
Randolph.
Paul Connors is here.
I know Paul Connors is here. Okay. Sharon. Stoughton.
Here.
Walpole.
Here.
Wellesley.
Here.
Westwood. Weymouth. And Rentham.
Through you, Mr. Chair, 67.11% of the body is present. And I am just letting Needham into the chat.
Thank you, Director.
Bill, point of order, does the Needham ad bring that percentage up beyond 67.11, or is that with it?
Is without, if you give me a second. My friends at Needham. 72%.
Thank you, Director. The second item is the budget transfers, and I would ask you to explain to us what we're doing. I think this should be pretty quick, so please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the advisory board. Thank you for accommodating a relatively an unusual midsummer advisory board meeting. It was necessitated as a result of 3 prongs in our FY23 budget development that we discussed back in May. Some of them were announced at that time. I'll go through them briefly. My intention this evening is to utilize your time efficiently, but as always, if any questions regarding details are needed, I'm here to answer any of them. What I plan to do, members of the Norfolk County Agricultural High School, John Martin, Superintendent, and also our Business Manager, John Wallace, are available to address any questions concerning one of the 3 pieces, which is the school's recently passed teacher's contract. The second prong of this evening's meeting is to address the transfer of funds in the FY23 budget that were associated with the facility maintenance budget. I'll get into those details in just a minute. And the last one is relative to the new information technology department budget. You all approved a certain line item for a salary that needs to be adjusted, and I'll explain that in just a moment. The chairman and members of the finance committee earlier at 6 o'clock convened a meeting. We went through similar details, and through you, Mr. Reardon, if you would like, I would suggest that members of the advisory board consider making a motion to approve any related items at the end of our discussion. It's a singular sheet. The total request for funds associated with all of this in the aggregate is $552,094.10. Most of this is coming from the school's reserve. The other balances are within the budget and have no structural impact on the FY23 budget previously approved. That's my introduction, Mr. Reardon. I'll follow whatever guidance you would like me to make, but if we're going to use the same script, I will respectfully yield to the Norfolk County Agricultural High School folks to explain their request to transfer $260,071.82. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director, through you, if it's necessary, I go to the members. Do the members have a question about this? This is a situation where collective bargaining agreement has had impact on the budget. It is not something that is unusual. However, it does affect the original FY '23 budget. Do members have questions about that before we get into any sort of specific questions with regard to the Aggie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Mr. Polito.
Just, is the $260,000 already budgeted within, in the tuition, or we taking, do we have extra money in that account? Was that-
If I could, Mr. Polito, I believe that, and the others will explain this, this is a situation where this is not part of the original budget. This is one which has become part of our discussion due to the collective bargaining agreement. I would defer to Mr. Cronin to explain, if I am wrong, how that works.
Great question, Mr. Polito. The schools I thought might be joining us. I see John Martin now coming in. I'll be happy to pitch in.
Here, John.
Okay, John, I yield. Go ahead if you'd like to answer the question.
And John Wallace couldn't make it to the second meeting tonight, so I'm carrying all the Aggies water tonight. When we submitted our initial budget, we were very conservative with regard to trying to project how many in-county versus out-of-county students that we were going to get in our freshman class. As it turns out, we ended up with a good number more out-of-county students coming into the Aggie as freshmen this year, which of course has a higher price tag or tuition rate attached to each of these students. So we ended up taking, or we're going to take in more money than we originally anticipated. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Polito.
Yeah, part one does it. Part two, what was the salary increase percentage-wise that you give the employees this year? How many year contract was this contract?
It's a 3-year contract, which we're pleased to announce is going to give us management and labor piece for at least 3 years. It's a rather complicated formula because we ended up splitting some of the monies in the first year, but overall it ends up in the 3.2 to 3.5 range overall over the course of the 3-year contract.
Every year, 3% per year?
That's the average
Okay, thank you.
over the life of the contract.
Just another, maybe a side question there. I know the representative from Braintree last week questioned about putting more in county students more than out of county. And that was the issue I think we raised it during the budget time. How do we didn't have a lot of kids from in county apply, or we just want to go outside and make more money for the system? I know that was a big discussion for the gentleman from Braintree last year.
Let me address the second part of your question first. We didn't do any solicitations. We didn't do any advertisement out of county any more than we would do in county. In fact, our admissions program, to be perfectly honest and transparent, needs a lot of work. So the numbers of kids that we get from out of county versus in county is at this point, in my opinion, dumb luck. There's no magic formula by which we recruit X number of kids from this particular town and Y number of kids from that town. In revising the admissions policies this last year, we were told by the Department of Education to give quote unquote preference to in-county kids, but preference was never defined for us. So we're going to analyze the data based on the incoming class to determine what we need to do next year to tweak it or to change it again if necessary. But we haven't had an opportunity to look at that data. Why did kids from this town apply and get in? Kids from this town chose not to apply. We just don't have that data in front of us right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, the distinguished member from Braintree has his hands up.
I cannot see that. Mr. Ryan, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have a question for the county director. How many unions are there in the county, and how many of the collective bargaining agreements have been signed?
There are 4, Charlie. The schools have 1 contract. The county has 3. The 3 county contracts are currently under negotiations. Those actions commenced. I think we first had our ground rule meetings in the spring, maybe March, if I'm not mistaken. We are well on our way with those negotiations. Those 3 contracts, Charlie, represent the maintenance union, the registry of deeds, and finally the engineering department. I am not prepared at this point to give you an idea of when those negotiations may end, but I'm happy to inform you that we have been robustly negotiating for the last several months. The schools preceded us by at least a month. They were a little bit ahead of us to try to achieve the timeline that Superintendent Martin just mentioned. So I'm hoping that you'll hear from us in the next couple of months with a contract proposal from the remaining 3 unions.
So to follow up with that, I know in the town of Braintree, we've been talking more modest increases for employees. If you mentioned 3.5, 3.5, 3.5 over 3 years to come up with 10.5% over 3 years, that's I haven't heard of anybody getting that much for cities and towns. So it leads me to believe that the county's a little out of touch with what's going on in the cities and towns that it represents. If I'm wrong and any other cities and towns are giving out those kind of percentages, chime in here and I'd appreciate the feedback, but we're not doing that in Braintree. And I work for the state and we got 2, 2, and 2.5 given out. So I don't know why any of the other 3 unions wouldn't take anything less than 3.5, 3.5, 3.5 now, after the teachers are getting 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. So it just, I guess I'm a little frustrated that the county's giving out such big numbers during these tough times. And this town of Braintree is not giving that out. So I don't know if anybody in the county can address that, how the teachers are getting more at the Aggie than teachers in the cities and towns, if somebody can address that.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
If I could, please, thank you, Mr. Ryan. I want to address this in particular fashion around the compensation for the teachers at the Aggie versus municipal teachers. Certainly, there are differences there, and it's a specialized education at the Aggie. Outside of that, I do recognize, to your credit, Mr. Ryan, that the state, if you will, in collective bargaining agreements does not typically go to this rate. However, when you are looking at retaining teachers and you are looking at keeping the specialized teachers in place, I think it may be different. However, having looked at the data, I can't be 100% sure because I am not in education. I am surely representing my town, and as you are, the communities in the Norfolk County, but I don't know, through you, Mr. Cronin, if you could kind of take a
Sure.
look at the compensation for the
Sure.
teachers at Aggie versus municipal teachers, and also, I'm sorry to do this to you, but and also any sort of additional compensation through contractual agreements, as, you know, I mean, cost of living, but obviously this is over and above
Nope,
that.
happy to.
Thank you.
Yep.
I apologize.
So I'll start, Joe, and I know John Martin's right behind me here, but in lieu of John Wallace's role, Charlie, I love that question. It's the right question. Collective bargaining agreements, especially in any public institution, are a significant growth area for an organization like county government that relies on static assessments and relatively, I'm not going to use the word volatile, but certainly variable deeds excise to fund our basic functions. One has to control those numbers. I couldn't agree with you more. In the case of the 3 collective bargaining agreements that we're currently discussing, they are distinctly different, as Joe Redden pointed out, in the nature of the work that they do. the comparison of work that they do to other counties and state public organizations. I don't have information to share with you, Charlie, on that tonight, but I want you to hear me clearly. I understand what you're saying. The schools are different. Earlier this evening, the schools made a presentation to the finance committee. The superintendent who is on the call will be happy to explain to you why, in this matter, the school's contract exceeds what you would typically and ordinarily see, as you described, to be a contemporary public employee union agreement. And in short, it's because the county got something out of this. We had to pay to get something extra. So I'll yield, Mr. Chairman, to John Martin, who I know will ably explain the educational benefits that the county's getting as a result of this proposed agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I didn't come prepared to share comps with other vocational and or comprehensive schools. However, I'd be happy to come to the next meeting with more of that type of data to share with the group. One of the reasons we're looking at this dollar figure.
Not trying to cut
In
out.
regard to
Lost it.
Student schedule. Norfolk Aggie teachers for the last number of contracts, and I'm not sure exactly how many it goes back, have taught 5 out of 8 class periods, which left many students, and I'm talking hundreds of students, in study halls or in self-directed programs without direct teacher supervision. And our primary goal in this contract was to get a 6th period scheduled into the teachers and students' day. And we achieved that. The teachers agreed that they would teach that 6th period. So I can report to you today that moving forward with the 22-23 school year, all of our students will be in front of teachers for 6 out of the 8 class periods during their school day. And self-directed studies, for example, will only be at the discretion of the student, family, guidance counselors, and so forth. It won't be because we have scheduling issues. So I think this is a major milestone in the Aggies' development and evolution as an educational institution. And I'm very proud of the work that our team did in getting this accomplishment for our kids, essentially.
Thank you. Other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Chairman,
Please do, Ms. Polito.
Yeah, I just finished negotiations, the chairman of the budget committee's negotiations for Blue Hills Regional Technical High School. And we just set up a 3-year contract at 6.75 over the 3 years. Previous contract was 6%. But going on what the superintendent just said, a few years ago, we ran into the same situation, like getting more time with the teachers in front of kids. And in the educational life, you have to pay for that. So, you know, with Norfolk Aggie is paying this year, Blue Hills pay for something similar, about a point a year over the 3-year contract, like 2 contracts ago. So I understand what Mr. Martin's saying, why it's higher, because you want something from the more teaching time, the teaching in front of students, they don't give it up for nothing. So we just went through the same situation years ago with the same thing that Norfolk Aggie is doing. And we just crossed the Blue Hills, extra 1% a year for 3 years. The last 2 contracts were a 6% and a 6.75, but we did pay prior to that money. Just a comment.
So, if I could, Mr. Polito, are you suggesting you're in support of this particular suggestion, or where are you?
Oh, well, I wasn't originally, but when you explained the increase, why it's a high increase, I am supporting it because I think you have to get something, you have to give something to get something. And I think the more time teachers can be in front of students, the better the student's going to be. So I'm supporting the high increase because of that reason.
Thank you, Mr. Polito. We appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
I got to be honest, I am on Zoom, so if you could identify yourself, please. My apologies.
Rick Beckerman.
Oh, Rick Beckerman, do I know you?
I think
Rick
so.
Beckerman, our clerk and member of the finance committee. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
bad.
sir. Through you to Mr. Martin, I just want to say
Please
that
do.
I agree with Mr. Ryan and Mr. Polito on their points. I guess the question I would have is that you made a comment that the percentage is between 3.2 and 3.7% average. So do you know can you tell us what the per year for the 3-year is?
Yeah, I can give you those numbers, Mr. Beckerman. And that's why in year one, for the teachers on the 1st through the 11th step are getting a 3% raise. The teachers at step 12 are getting 3 3/4. In year 2, everybody gets 3.5. And in year 3, everybody gets 3 1/4.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
When you said average, I was worried that there might be a 2 on one end and a 4 on the other end.
No,
That seems
no.
pretty consistent, so I'm good with that. Thank
As you might imagine, some of the numbers that were exchanged during the preliminary negotiations were kind of crazy, but we were able to work through that.
It's unions it's always crazy. So thank you, Mr. Martin, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Beckerman. Are there other questions? I think Mr. Ryan from Braintree has your hand up.
Thank you. Want to ask the county director, so we have to fund this, these increases, and we've heard how we have more out-of-county students at the Aggie and have some extra money. But my question is, on the long term, how are we going to fund these increases combined with, say, the 3 other unions get something comparable? For the sake of this discussion, they get something comparable. How are we going to fund those increases? Are they one-time funds, or can we sustain that?
Another great question. So I'd like to think of them as silos, Charlie. The school's budget and the county's budget for the purposes of funding collective bargaining impacts are separate. We don't have a single pool or reserve account to pay for both. So what the schools did in FY23 is they created a budget, as Superintendent Martin indicated, that had a surplus in it in anticipation of signing a collective bargaining agreement. Subsequent to that modest conservative approach, they experienced additional out-of-county tuition gain. So their surplus or / reserve account has grown, and that's a good thing. We talked about this an hour ago on the Finance Committee, that a year ago, as I joined the county, it was recognized that the school's cash position was tenuous and something needed to be done. The schools engaged in a study that you all approved that looked at the tuition modeling. And as a result of the tuition modeling and the funds that flowed, it is now producing a favorable cash position for the schools to generate a favorable reserve each year. Because while Mr. Martin and the schools experienced a favorable out-of-county enrollment this year, we can't predict that for next year or the year after. I understand from Rick Fitzpatrick, for example, in his term, there are years that they go up and down, and it wreaks havoc on the county's ability to provide a sustainable level funding amount. So what the reserve is intended to do, among other things, is to provide the air brake on those years when you may have more in-county kids coming in, Charlie, and you've got to pay for the imbalance that's caused. And as this reserve grows, and right now it's projected to be well over $600,000 in FY23, it's going to give the schools the ability to handle those ups and downs. The reserve account, Mr. Wallace explained to the Finance Committee earlier, and the purposes of this growing reserve have not really been fully formed. I think the superintendent and the business manager, John, again, I will never speak for you. If I speak out of turn, please correct me. I think it's safe to say the development of what other things that reserve can do besides flatten out those years where the in and out of county kids may not be favorable, could be for one-time expenses, small repairs, and other initiatives that are outside their appropriation. So that's thing one. On the county side, yes, it is sustained. We funded a reserve account out of our operating budget that we plan to use to fund the increases in FY23. And that's that funding, if you will, is baked into our sustained revenue projections over the next 5 years. So I'm very comfortable to let you know that on the county side, the stability of where the money will come from to pay for those COLAs is baked into our base. I hope I answered your question, Charlie. And John, if I misspoke, please speak up. Sorry.
Through the chair, as a follow-up, it's just, as I said, in Braintree, we cut the school department budget. We didn't fund all the teacher positions we wanted to fund for this upcoming, for this year we just started. We're having a very difficult time with our budget because of COVID. I know with the county handling the COVID money, we have some additional funds that we can utilize for certain parts of our budget that is helping overall. But I've been on the Norfolk County Advisory Board for 18 years, and I've been in some meetings where we don't know where we're getting the money from to fund the budget. And I'm sure those times are going to be back. And I just feel like sometimes the county operates in a vacuum where it's kind of like, we'll give them 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. And everybody else all around is not getting that money. And I don't agree with it. And maybe I'm going to be the only one that doesn't agree with it, but I don't agree with those kinds of numbers when the cities and towns that Norfolk County represents aren't giving out the same numbers. And this is going to be a tough vote for me, but I don't agree with it.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Ryan, I will acknowledge that the municipalities in the county have had a tough time, particularly with COVID. There have been a lot of changes. Public schools in particular have been affected when certain commercial tax bases have had issues. What I would acknowledge is that there's two pieces to this and I would ask for Mr. Martin and Mr. Cronin to correct me if I'm wrong. Number one is that the tuition from the outside of county folks does contribute to the revenue more than in county. And the other piece is, of course, the fact that, and this is something that goes up and down. Now, Registrar O'Donnell will tell you that he is the person who has been the rainmaker for all of the funds that have been generated through his office. However, what I will tell you, and you know this as well, Mr. Ryan, because in Braintree, the cost of purchasing a home has been exorbitant over the past few years. I couldn't afford to purchase a home in Braintree today. And what has happened is that those funds, particularly the Register sent out something recently in his last missive regarding the amount of money that has been taken in by the county, that $1.2 million is the average home price in Norfolk County. Now, that's pretty high. Now, when you take a look at that, you take a look at it with the idea that, okay, in a particular community, those funds from the commercial tax base, from the residential tax base would go into the tax revenues that would help to fund the particular programs and or collective bargaining agreements in this case. I think the county is a little bit different. I don't disagree with you. I think that men and women who work, particularly in organized labor on the public side, as well as on the independent side, should be considered for the work that they do. However, I do not believe that this particular situation is over and above what a municipality would do if they could do it. And I think that the county can do it right now in order to retain people who are qualified to serve at the Aggie and to educate our students. I think this may be an appropriate way to address it. Now, that being said, I do agree with you in representing the town of Braintree. My wife is from Braintree. I do agree with you representing the council and the mayor that this is a concern and we certainly should address that.
Could I jump in, Joe?
Please do, Commissioner Collins.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, I had a big problem with the numbers in the negotiations also. I thought it was kind of high. But what was explained to me was, and I'm going to really dumb it down because it helped when it was dumbed down to me. We're asking our teachers to teach 20% more per day. And it was explained to me by our labor council that that was something that we had to pay for. And I think advisory board member Polito really nailed it, because he had to face this in his capacity in the other vocational school board. And that particular year that they did that, they had to pay more for it. And so the overall plan was that, yes, the teachers are operating in a vacuum at the school, and their contract is going to probably pay them more than maybe other unions for this specific reason. It's not like the other county employees have been asked to work 20% more. So this is a very specific individual situation in terms of the union. When it was explained to me like that, and was explained to me by Labor Council how when this particular event happens, and all the different school systems have had to go through this, that there is a specific jump for this particular contract. So it's something we had to do. It was the best thing for our students. And it was something the teachers weren't going to give up easily, because they're teaching 20% more per day than they ever had before. So knowing all that, I did vote for it. But yeah, it was a reach for me, because it is such a large amount in these questionable times.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other members of the advisory board who wish to speak to this issue?
I think Helen has her
Yes.
hand up.
You don't have your hand up? You're just drinking water.
Helen does.
Helen does. I don't see
do.
Helen.
Helen
Hi,
doesn't know
folks.
it.
Can you hear me?
I absolutely hear you, Ms.
Thank
Donahue.
you.
Go
First,
right ahead.
thank you. First of all, I'm sorry that I was late. Second of all, Helen Donahue, no, would move the question.
Helen, I just want to tell you right now, you're gonna have to dock your pay for being late.
So good. It's so good. I move the question.
You moved the question.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Moving the question then, I would like to entertain a second to the, or has there been a motion made? No, I don't believe there has. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Mr. Beckman. Is there a second?
Second from Dedham.
Second from Mr. Polito from Dedham. Mr. Iantoska, are you on the line here? I don't see you.
It's me, sir, but you do have a hand raised from Mr. Ryan and Dr. Childs.
Mr. Ryan of Braintree, I'm sorry, Charlie, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
That all the money issues that we're voting on tonight, the raises for the teachers, or is there any other money that we're voting on?
We have 2 additional items to vote on, Charlie.
Are we voting on them right now, or is this just a separate motion, the teachers?
I yield to the chairman on the motion on the floor.
I would suggest that these are part and parcel of the budget transfers so that we can entertain this motion. However, I would agree that the motion should be inclusive of the 2 other items that are on play. Mr. Cronin, would you be able to speak to that, please?
Yes, in addition to the school budget transfers, as we've just discussed, there are 2 other items. The facility maintenance department in FY22 was considered an area of possible consolidation as a result of the Abrahams Group recommendations. Consequently, approximately a half a dozen workers were hired during that time frame under temporary worker status. When we built the FY23 budget, we left the monies in that category because the actions of moving those workers, once they were made permanent as of July 1st, had to undergo collective bargaining bidding exercises. We didn't know what positions any individual would land in and consequently how to fund it. I believe I mentioned that back in May when we talked that I would return requesting an adjustment. So this evening, we are asking to move from the temporary salary line within the FY23 budget, $147,022.28 to the permanent line, which will now reflect the salaries of the individuals who've successfully bid and been moved into those slots for FY23. That is the second item. If you want me to continue, Mr. Reardon, I'll complete the task of explaining the last item on the list this evening.
Mr. Cronin, if I could bear with you for one moment, I believe Mr. Padula from Franklin raised his hand, although it's Zoom. I think Mr. Padula may have a parliamentary question. Mr. Padula, you're recognized.
Actually, I just had a general question. Typically, when we do these budgets, I thought someone was going to take these and just run them down for us. So 267, 07182, they're going to go down to different positions and talk about what they filled. So this is anyone going to do that piece for us?
I would defer to Mr. Cronin. Mr. Cronin, I think
So-
that would be appropriate.
Sure. So I'd be happy to do that, Peter. What's presented to me by the schools is the offset. The total cost of the increases that Mr. Martin and the schools have presented totals $260,071.82. I will read the lines for your benefit of where those dollars are going by budget line item. Is that sufficient, Peter?
Yeah, and these are positions that were already anticipated. Is that correct?
Yes, I want to state that these are not positions, Peter. These are line items. So the positions are within, in this case, the professional salaries line item, the classroom teachers line item, and so forth.
Okay, they're line items. Okay, thank you.
Bill has actually brought that up. Yeah, I'd be happy to read it, or if visual inspection is sufficient, just let me know what you'd like me to do.
No, I have the paper in front of me. I just wanted to make sure I knew what I was looking at. Thank you.
Right. So you can see the 260 is now flowing down. It's covering the costs involved with the permanent teacher salaries as well as the stipends from this particular agreement.
Very good. Thank you. I see that. Thank you.
Following that, just to kind of continue on, the reflection of the $147,022.28 are the facility maintenance movements. That's a internal movement, no gain, no additional spending against our appropriation. Okay.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Reardon, shall I proceed with the final item?
Please do, Mr. Cronin.
With respect to the Information Technology Department, as I stated at the outset, the advisory board approved a salary for the Chief Information Officer for FY23 based on some figures that came over from the Registry of Deeds when they had a position funded in FY22. That dollar amount was $129,067.40. Over the last several weeks, the county has obviously engaged in a consolidated technology initiative. The initiative began following your vote on May 11th with the posting of the position. I would like to publicly thank Advisory Board Member Kevin Calkett, who's on the call tonight. He helped us screen 14 candidates who we interviewed internally for this position. Over the course of that period of time, primarily June into early July, we pretty much exhausted the candidate pool. We did advance one to a final interview. Another advisory board member, Chuck Phelan, who's the former CIO from the registry, joined us in the second round of interviews, and I want to publicly thank him for the time he committed to this process. The candidate that advanced on the from the first round to the second was not preferred. So we subsequently broadened our posting area, and we recently came upon a candidate from the private sector who has by far scored the highest of all of the candidates, and he presents us an opportunity through hire, but we must revisit the salary that's been appropriated in order to move further into this hiring process. For the purposes of privacy, I've mentioned earlier to the Finance Committee and certainly to the commissioners earlier today, I'm not at liberty today to discuss the individual's name or any of his personal details. The exercise here is to publicly make available the funds to allow the county commissioners to proceed with the hiring process contingent upon the successful background check, a physical, and a query. That amount of money that we are now looking to move is to adjust the salary from $129,067.40 up to $145,000. With respect to the cost, as members of the advisory board may understand, this position was funded fully as of July 1st. We have gone through 11 pay periods. We have accumulated a significant salary savings in FY23. I also want to point out that the commissioners wisely believe that at the early point of FY23, that the Consolidated Technology Department could make use of a interim chief information officer. They chose to appoint Mr. Dan Caparata from the registry to that position. Dan has been a stalwart, wonderful employee. I think the register speaks highly of him as well. He's got over 8 years working over there. He's got a command of the system. He's been a complete pleasure to work with. In September, I will give your board a thorough update on the county transition. I'm not at liberty this evening to discuss those details, but I want to thank Dan Caparata for acting during this time period as the CIO, and also Mark McDonald for partnering with him and bringing forth the true elements of the beginning of a transition that shows a consolidated technology department. As a result of Mr. Caparata's out-of-grade pay, the proposed new salary, and the available funds that were appropriated by your board back in May, the total amount appropriated was $333,394.02. My projections now indicate that if this particular position was approved at this rate, and marking it off from this point through the end of June, and again with Mr. Caparata's brief out-of-grade pay, we will expend $323,076.53 for an overall savings of $10,317. Yes, I know that the annualized costs of these positions, including the increase to the CIO, will have an impact in FY24. One of the items that came up in today's discussion with the county commissioners, which I think was a very, very good conversation, reflects where things are going from a technological and salary perspective with this position, with this department. And I wanted to recall a conversation that your board had in May where there was seemingly a growing consensus to look at hires within the department pursuant to the Ripples Group recommendation to build in redundancy, professionalism, and a path of service that the entire county can enjoy for the years to come. If you recall, some members wanted to consider funding vacant positions with the hopes of filling them, and I politely and respectfully asked to put that off until we receive the CIO on site, develop a strategic plan, and move forward. You will hear the elements of that plan in a month. So this evening, I just wanted to introduce to you the developments so far that brought us to the point where we will need this increased salary ceiling to move forward with this selected candidate and hopefully bring him on in time to meet you in September. That is all I have, Mr. Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Director. To the members, this is a situation where we are addressing some fiduciary responsibilities that we take very seriously. However, we have to, in my opinion, look at it from 30,000 feet in terms of how we address the future of the county. County government is important to all of us. And if we do not address these issues now, we could have an issue down the road. As an example, I would like to, as a separate motion, recognize Dan Caparata for his work in making this happen. Mr. Caparata was working specifically under the direction of the Register of Deeds. His position was not one which was easy to manage, given all the issues that surrounded that position and the stress that surrounded that. But yet he was so agreeable and so encouraging of this particular process that we want to recognize him. I also want to acknowledge the fact that if we were to hire someone in a setting that was, lack of a better term, non-governmental, we would be looking at a far higher salary than we are looking at the $145,000. So to my colleagues, I would encourage you to consider the investment we're making in county government. I think all of us believe that county government is something that is going to help us long-term, regionalization, other pieces that are going to be helpful to the citizens of the communities in which we represent. So to that, I would ask, number one, that if there is someone that is willing to do so, they make a motion to approve the financial pieces as presented, and these transfers be presented to the commissioners to be signed off on. Is there a member that is willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Chairman- Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman,
That motion being moved, I do want to refer it to the Finance Committee. I would ask that Dr. Childs, if you could please give a report from the Finance Committee.
I second that motion, Mr. Reardon.
Thank you very much. I don't know who that was, but we'll take it.
Mr.
Gotta
Reardon.
get the
real quick-
glasses on.
Mr. Reardon,
It's
real quick, I'm
Paul.
sorry, I'm
Please,
sorry,
Mr.
Dr.
Beckerman.
Childs.
Oh, it's Mr.
No.
Connors.
I don't mean to cut everybody off,
Please do.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ryan has had his hand up for quite some time.
Mr. Ryan,
Thank you. So I just like Mr. Badula wanted to hear the explanation of all of these items. And I have just a couple of questions and one comment. The comment is, I want to thank the advisory board members that took part in the process of finding a new IT director. And it's very encouraging to hear that the gentleman from the registry worked in a very cooperative manner. That's I wish all of government could be doing that now. So that's very encouraging. I think the $145,000 is a lot of money, but I have faith in everybody that we're making the right decision with that salary amount to put something in place that will serve the county well moving forward. So I'm going to support that. My question related to the temporary employees going to full-time employees. And you said that we had a report that said we should not fill positions. Is that changed? And now we are filling the positions and now they are going to be permanent positions? That's question one. And question number two, is any permanent employee salary gone up as a result of these moves?
So two things, Charlie, on the former question, the task involving the temporary assignment was strictly related to the commissioner's deliberations on the Abrahams Group recommendations to consider consolidation of facility maintenance with the schools. They did not adopt that change. So subsequently, at the end of fiscal year 23, when their decision was made not to adopt that for FY 23, they moved to make them all permanent. So that's what happened. And yes, some of the people that bid to the open positions were in lower grades. And because of their bidding rights, Charlie, they were allowed to bid up into higher grade positions that were vacant. But
So-
they do so, as you know, through seniority.
Okay, so no one that was in a job is getting more money just because they're in the same job. It's all people that bid on new jobs. And went
That's
into.
correct. That's correct. You got it.
Thank
You're
you very much.
Anytime.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
please do.
The, on the temporary salaries, how many, how long has these, employees been temporary? And how, are we paying them temporary? Are they getting the full, benefits? How's that working out? And they, when they go permanent, is that another vote by the commissioners to make them permanent, or how's this whole thing gonna work out?
Well, I
Right,
would
so it's all-
defer to the director on that, but my assumption is that a temporary employee is just that. A permanent employee is one that is in the system who has the ability to work with collective bargaining, but however, I am going to defer to the director.
No, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Polito, good question. I believe the first worker that entered the temporary scheme was hired in August of 2021. So between that period of time and roughly the spring of 2022, we hired an additional, I believe, 5 people. These are all facility maintenance workers and so forth. When they are hired, they are given full benefits of health and other costs. I believe the only thing that holds back the difference between a permanent and a temporary is your accrued time for retirement purposes. So those are details that I'm expressing based on what knowledge I have, but I want to let you know it was a very short-term time period that I believe commenced somewhere in August of 21. The last temp was hired in the spring, but as of July 1, as a result of all this bidding, they're all permanent now, Tom,
Well,
with full benefits.
are they permanent, subject to our vote tonight? I'm just,
No.
you know, I'm just trying to get some, you know, I mean, some of the guys are temporary for a year. That doesn't seem they should be temporary for a year. I just don't, you know, if they're gonna be there, they should have been permanent maybe. That's how I'm, you know, if you're temporary and permanent, we just, is that just semantics maybe we're talking about really?
In a manner of speaking, it is. I don't want to convolute the conversation. Some of the positions that are in play today involve individuals that were not temporary. but because of the vacancy in the bidding and the hiring of the temporary workers, this gets complicated. There was some hopscotching going on. So we do have individuals that were permanent that needed to get their positions approved tonight from to fund them into FY23. The action of all this was caused by the temporary worker assignment. That's all now cleaned up. Everyone's permanent.
And how many employees, do we hire any
6.
new employees? Number wise, I'm saying, do we had 5 last year, now we have 5 this year? Or we're from
Yes,
5
it's
to
a-
7?
No, it's the same number as it was when you approved the budget.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
All set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Polito. Other members? I believe there was a motion on the floor. I was going to ask, having the motion been made and seconded, that the Finance Committee weigh in on the vote from the Finance Committee, which was held at 6 o'clock tonight. Chair Childs, if you could, please.
I'm ready. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
So the bottom line for everybody to know is that the Finance Committee voted unanimously to support all of these transfers. I will just give you a couple things about the background, many of which you have raised. Regarding the teachers union, there was a strong discussion about the importance of developing a reserve, using whatever dollars are left over from the, so that we don't take everything for obviously negotiations, but to build up a reserve that the benchmark is somewhere between 5 and 10% of their total $15 million budget. So we have a long way to go to do that. It speaks to some of the concerns tonight about the negotiated raise. I do want to highlight that this is a very specific raises, and it's not really a generalizable kind of COLA increase that we try to think about across all of public sector. So I think that is important as things unfold over the next few months. The maintenance department is obviously very self-explanatory. These are people who were working temporarily, waiting, getting ready to go into permanent positions, and then because of union rules, bumping happens and we need to adjust this. We need to move these funds from temporary to permanent. And the new IT department, there was a definite feeling among the Finance Committee members that we really want strong, good talent in our IT services because it's such an important part of the county's operations. And that means we have to pay for that. So there was a strong support for all 3 of these transfer items in the amount of $552,094.10. Thank you. That's it, Mr.
The
Chairman.
recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the motion as submitted.
It is absolutely. Yes.
Well, thank you, Dr. Childs. Are there any other questions or comments, discussion with regard to this motion?
Move the question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Connors of Randolph has asked that we move the question. The motion has been made and seconded. No further discussion. I will call the roll and I would defer to, and I have to be honest, I believe Mr. Buckley, are you calling the roll at this point?
Mr. Beckman, if you'd like to, I have the tally sheet.
Perfect. I'm sorry, that was incorrect of me. It was Mr. Buckley would be recording, Mr. Beckerman would be actually calling it. Sorry, Eric.
That's all right. We'll just send Paul Connors over to, not Paul Connors, Peter over to smack you around a little bit, right?
Well, it's all right. He lives down the street from me and he has a bicycle. So this could happen.
I'm honest, I promise.
My bad.
All right, you ready, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Avon votes aye. Bellingham. Braintree.
Aye.
Brookline.
Aye.
Canton. Cohasset.
Aye.
Dedham.
Aye.
Dover. Foxborough.
Aye.
Franklin.
Yes.
Usual. Holbrook. Medfield. Medway. Millis.
Aye.
Milton.
Aye.
Needham.
Aye.
Norfolk.
Aye.
Norwood.
Aye.
Plainville. Quincy.
Aye.
Randolph,
Yes.
Sharon, Stoughton,
Yes.
Walpole,
Yes.
Wellesley,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Weymouth, Rentham.
3, Mr. Clerk.
I
79.09% in the affirmative
I
on the
believe
motion.
that was unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Beckerman, and through you to Mr. Buckley. In looking at the agenda, that would be the vote we needed for the transfers. I would ask now for a consideration of a vote to approve the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve? those minutes?
approve.
Second,
I'm sorry, I didn't get who that
Mr.
was, but
Chairman.
Quincy.
Braintree,
Mr. Phelan. Hi, Chuck.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Please do,
Uh,
Mr. Buckley.
I would like to recognize his erroneous failure to record the community of Wellesley, who was with us last time. So I have amended that on the,
Oh,
who was there. We would not want to forget our
Ms.
neighbors.
Searle
to the
should be
north.
recognized. Thank you. So that will be corrected. So is there a motion to approve as amended? Mr. Phelan, I assume that is correct.
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Is there a
Braintree,
second?
second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brian from Braintree, is that correct?
Got it.
This Zoom thing is killing me. Okay, there has been a motion and it has been seconded. I am going to ask Mr. Beckerman as clerk, through Mr. Buckley, to call the roll and determine if we have.
Yeah, it's over here. So let's unplug the fan.
Okay,
Someone's unplugging a fan.
Right?
yeah.
I got it.
Avon votes aye. Bellingham, Braintree, Brookline,
Aye.
Canton, Cohasset,
Aye.
Dedham,
Aye.
Dover, Foxborough, Franklin,
Yes.
Holbrook, Medfield,
Yep.
Medway, Millis,
This is a three-pronged plug.
Milton.
Aye.
Needham, Norfolk,
Aye.
Norwood,
Aye.
Plainville, Quincy,
Aye.
Randolph,
Yes.
Sharon, Stoughton,
Yes.
Walpole,
Yes.
Wellesley,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Weymouth, Rentham. Mr. Buckley,
Through you, Mr. Clerk, the number is the same, 79.09 in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. Beckerman, and through you to Mr. Buckley. There is another item on the agenda, and that item I would like to separate out. The first is Mr. Connors of Randolph has approached the chair, speaking to the nominating committee that was appointed at the meeting in June. I would recognize Mr. Connors for a report from the nomination committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you alluded to, the nominating committee was appointed at the June meeting. At that time, you appointed Michael Boynton, John Conley, and myself to serve on the nominating committee. In review of the bylaws which were amended in May of 2019, it calls for, I will read the change in it, Article 2, Officers of the Board, second paragraph. The officers elected shall serve for the following fiscal year or until election of their respective successors. Officers of the Norfolk County Advisory Board shall serve a maximum of 2 years in any one office. And I read that to you because in that we have already gone, we were late in the appointing of a nominating committee. That's not a criticism by any means. And therefore, we're already 2 months into the fiscal year with the current slate of officers. We are recommended that that slate of office continue in their positions for the remaining 10 months of the fiscal year. We're not meeting again until September, so it'll be 3 months into it. So the committee has recommended nominating Joe Reardon is the chairman, Dr. Childs is the vice chairman, and Eric Beckerman is the vice chair. They've already served the first year of a 2-year term, which they're allowed to serve. And they're, as I said, 2 months into the second year already. So I would, at this time, make that as a recommendation for the officers for the advisory board. And as a furtherance to that, ask that we have an election tonight so that the officers are in full force and effect, so that we have the nomination committee report and an election this evening.
Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could, point of order.
Please, Mr. Cronin, you're recognized, Director.
I apologize, members of the advisory board. Recognizing that the expressions of Mr. Connors fall into an area, I just wanted to alert you as to the posted agenda for this meeting. Mr. Chairman, I would ask if you believe that the utterances of Mr. Connors reflect items that are not emergency items or topics that you, the chair, did not reasonably anticipate would be discussed. You believe it meets that standard?
Oh, you're locked up, John.
So the question is, do you believe what Mr. Connors is requesting this evening fits under number, the item on the agenda, emergency items that the chair did not reasonably anticipate would be discussed? Do you believe that meets that standard?
I would argue that I did not anticipate that this would come up now, but I also recognize that this, given Mr. Connors' background on the matter, the fact that this is a typically fiscal year matter, it is now August. I would anticipate that this could be considered an emergency situation in order that the advisory board can continue as is. Obviously, this could be a situation where members may want to nominate other folks. In that case, which I am aware that that is a possibility, I would be happy to defer that. However, I do want to make sure that continuity is maintained at least through the next meeting on September 14th. So I would go back to Mr. Connors with that, and I appreciate your information, Director Cronin, to make sure that we are in compliance not only with the law, but also with our mission to keep county government moving forward.
I would suggest that, should we vote on the officers tonight, the nominations would be open. And we have more than a majority of members of the advisory board here. And I do recognize the fact that Helen had her hand up at one point, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Donahue, you're recognized.
Thank you. I move that we accept the report of the nominating committee and close nominations.
So Ms. Donahue of Norwood has made a motion to accept the report of the nomination committee and close nominations. Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ryan of Braintree has his hands up.
Point of order,
Sorry,
right?
Mr. Ryan, I cannot see everything. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think something that might be more appropriate is that we make a motion to accept the recommendation of the nominating committee and do that first.
Okay.
Okay, I'll amend my motion.
Second,
So the amended motion, a friendly amendment, is to
Yes.
recommend that the body consider the motion as being that of the recommendation of the nomination committee. Is that correct?
that's the spirit of my motion. So that's the motion.
Okay, so Mrs. Donahue, you have made that motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Mr. Ryan has seconded it. So the motion on the floor is that the recommendation of the nominating committee be that myself, Joe Reardon, be the chair, that Dr. Elizabeth Childs of Brookline be vice chair, and that Eric Beckerman of Avon be the clerk of the Norfolk County Advisory Board for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2023.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
under discussion, I would say maybe if anybody else wanted to make a nomination right now would be appropriate.
Nominations are open.
Mr. Chairman, having heard no second nominations, I make a motion to close nominations.
Second.
Nominations have been closed by motion of Mr. Ryan, seconded by Mrs. Donahue. Going back to the main motion, the vote would be to approve the nomination slate as voted by the nominating committee. Mr. Connors, as chair, has given that to our committee tonight. I would ask that, having heard no more discussion, Mr. Beckerman and Mr. Buckley, or Mr. Buckley through Mr. Beckerman, call the roll for a vote.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, I'd like to
Please.
just say that I think even though we're doing this tonight, I think it's appropriate, and I just wanted to commend the yourself and the other leadership of the county that's done a very good job over these very difficult times we've had over the last couple of years, and I fully support you folks in this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Charlie.
Mr. Chair,
Please, Mrs. Donahue. you're
thank you.
recognized.
And I'd like to also mention that in regard to Mr. Cronin's remarks earlier, I think this is important enough. I don't know if you'd say it's an emergency, but it's important enough to be acted upon at this time so that we can continue good government.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Donahue. Your remarks have been recognized. So Mr. Beckerman and Mr. Buckley, are you prepared to call the roll?
Bill, are you all set?
I live for this stuff. Let's go.
All right.
Recommend.
Avon
Ties
votes
off and
aye.
everything.
Okay, Avon votes aye. Bellingham. Braintree.
Aye.
Brookline.
Aye.
Canton. Cohasset.
Aye.
Dedham.
Aye.
Dover. Foxborough.
Aye.
Franklin.
Yes.
Holbrook. Medfield. Medway. Millis.
Aye.
Milton.
Aye.
Needham.
Aye.
Norfolk. Norfolk. Norwood.
Jump.
Aye.
Plainville. Quincy.
Aye.
Randolph.
Aye.
Sharon. Stoughton.
Aye.
Walpole.
Yes.
Wellesley.
Aye.
Westwood.
Aye.
Weymouth. Rentham.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Clerk, the total is unanimous. It is 77.93. And through Mr. Chair, just as a point of parliamentary procedure, I know we do have a couple of new advisory board members. The reason we call and we give a percentage is that the community's votes are weighted by their valuation. So that's why we give a number as well.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Mr. Beckerman,
Yes.
are you okay with the report?
Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with it.
You think Billy can count? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think Billy can count it. I'd say that's a unanimous vote.
I didn't go the Aggie,
Mr.
but
Walpole.
Ridden, can I point out to Mr. Ryan that there was no pay raise there either?
I don't find that funny at all.
Oh, come on,
Right.
Charlie.
From the chair, two pieces I would like to share before we adjourn. Number one is the fact that in June, I asked members to, and for the new members, I will speak to that in a moment. I had asked members to take a poll. I surveyed the members about their expectations of the advisory board, their competencies, their constituencies, their willingness to serve in certain areas. I would encourage that members please, and I will send it out again, respond to that so that we can effectively serve the residents of Norfolk County as our advisory board on county expenditures. So that's number one. Number two, to the new members, I will be in touch. I know there are a couple of new members. I just want to extend my appreciation on behalf of Dr. Childs and Mr. Beckerman and the entire board for your service here on the Norfolk County Advisory Board. We will be in touch. We'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on how county government can serve our communities better. And lastly, on September 14th, we will be having our next meeting. That next meeting will be our usual meeting to consider any sort of adjustments to our budget. And I know that over the next few weeks, there will be adjustments to the budget, given the circumstances that we are under right now. That being said, I also want to recognize that it has been the opinion of the chair that we should move from location to location to get a better sense of the facilities we're working with and the communities that we serve. The next meeting will be held at the Norfolk County Recreational Facility, also known as President's Golf Course. Mr. Ryan, I would, if I could please appoint you as chair of the committee to take a look at the operations of the golf course. Are you willing to do that?
Here, here.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. So Mr. Ryan will be chair of the committee to look at the operation of the golf course. I know that the golf course has been a significant source of recreation and also revenue for the county. Mr. Ryan, if you could, you and I can speak offline with regard to how that would be approached, but the members of the advisory board who wish to do so will have the opportunity to tour the golf course, to look at the improvements, to look at the funds that have been placed into those improvements, and to bring that through to a meeting that will be held that evening. So Mr. Ryan, you and I can speak offline about how best to handle that. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. Is there any other business to come before the Norfolk County Advisory Board this evening?
Mr.
Chairman,
Walsh
one-
has his hand raised.
One comment, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Walsh has something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, does that include all 18 holes all at once or?
Mr. Walsh, it will be individually. As a person from Dorchester who could see the President's Golf Course from his home growing up, I will tell you that it is a magnificent facility, and I would encourage you to join with Mr. Ryan in exploring the improvements that have been made, having driven by it pretty much every day over the past year. I can tell you it's magnificent, and our money is well spent.
Thank you. I'm happy to do it, Mr. Ryan.
Sounds good, Mike.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
just one comment about the pay raise for the teachers. I just hope the commissioners hold tight when, just the teachers got that higher raise. I think we should look at the other contracts. As the gentleman from Braintree said, we just because they did extra 20% more, doesn't mean we have to mirror the contract to the other unions that the teachers have. So just, when you come back to us, I don't want to look at that huge contract for the other employees, because it's not, you're not matching apples and apples. I'm saying you're not the same thing. So I know at Blue Hills, the union tried the same thing, and we told them flat out no. It's because they put extra time in. So, so they did try that originally in their first proposal to us. So just hopefully the commissioners hold pretty tight on a normal pay raise, whatever you think normal is. It's not 3.5%, 3.25%. It's not between 3% and 4% a year. So I just want to make that comment. So.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Polito. As someone in the insurance industry, that commissions can change, and that sometimes that affects how things go. And that I know you would appreciate it. You would certainly take a cut in commission in order to keep things going. So I appreciate your
Every day.
involvement here. You would take that commission cut, and I know that the unions appreciate your involvement here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Braintree.
And that would be Mr. Ryan of Braintree. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Walsh. from
Mr.
West-
Walsh of Westwood. And I would kindly ask, having been made and seconded, this motion be forwarded to Mr. Beckerman and through him to Mr. Buckley for a call of the roll.
All right, Avon votes aye. Bellingham. Braintree,
Aye.
Brookline,
Aye.
Canton. Cohasset,
Aye.
Dedham,
Yes.
Dover. Foxborough,
Aye.
Franklin,
Yes.
Holbrook. Medfield,
Aye.
Medway. Millis,
Hey,
Milton,
we got one. One right there.
Milton,
Aye.
Needham,
Aye.
Norfolk. Norwood,
Aye.
Plainville. Quincy,
Aye.
Randolph,
Yes.
Sharon. Stoughton,
Aye.
Walpole,
Yes.
Wellesley,
Yes.
Westwood,
Aye.
Weymouth, and Rentham.
78.84, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you,
Thank you very
sir.
much, Mr. Beckerman and Mr. Buckley. To all of the members, I say thank you, but particularly to our new members, I will be in touch. Thank you so much for your commitment to the county. And we will see all of you on September 14th. Thanks so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Night, everyone. Good night. Be safe.